So don't be too concerned if you're struggling with FCR, because in reality everybody is. Okay, so just turning now to specific research methodologies for first contact resolution. And of course what we've got here is we've got a situation where there are some traditional research tools. Some of them have been around for quite a long time, which people have tried to deploy to tackle first contact resolution. And they form part of the group which we call the suboptimal methods. And we'll come on to those in a second. And although we're going to concentrate on survey methods, just a couple of quick words about some other methods that are involved as well. And I'm going to start with call recording. A lot of the organizations, when we first start talking to them, they start saying, well, we use call recording to identify first contact resolution. That is actually a nonsense. And there's a little bit of maths here on screen you'll see, which we tend to use. So an organization claiming a 95% first contact resolution rate is really saying that 1 in 20, just 1 in 20 of their calls are repeat, or 1/20th of their calls. And if the organization identifies that it has 20 main repeat contact reasons, that can also be represented as 1/20th. And then lastly, if it's an organization with 200 agents, then a single agent represents 1/200th of their staff. So if we put those three numbers together, you'll see that actually they come to 80,000. So what that means is if you've got people listening in to call recording in the way you might do for quality analysis, you have a situation that to find an individual repeat contact reason at the agent level, you have to listen to stupid numbers of calls. So it actually doesn't work. So moving on from that, what I'd like to just have a chat about is a more traditional, if you like, mainstream research method, which is mystery shopping. And we find ourselves, we actually compete with a program called Top 50, which is based on a Top 50 call centers for customer service, which is actually based on a mystery shopping exercise. And we've dined out rather nicely against that. And the two reasons which I've got on the slide there why people think this doesn't really work too well for first contact resolution is that it is basically a high-cost, low-volume research methodology. And whilst it retains a place in new product development and sentiment research, it has glaring weaknesses as an FCR tool. It's a tool that most organizations happen to have, and then they think, shall we point to the FCR? Well, actually, it's really pretty much a waste of time. And we got a quote there from actually a guy who's an operational manager at a major UK mobile company. He used to work for me years ago. And a quote from Steve actually says that in our centre, my agents knew that the second they were speaking, my agents knew the second they were speaking to a mystery shopper, the contact was just too artificial. And that's a message we hear time and time again with people moving away from mystery shopping. And the second thing of mystery shopping is just looking against, for example, an IVR survey. You can get 40 IVR surveys in the UK for the cost of one mystery shopping call. So, you know, and that was reported to us by Canon Europe. So you can see there's some clear weaknesses in that, and I think largely can be discounted as a first contact resolution tool. 3 reasons: you can't practically deploy thousands of calls, is what you need. They're expensive, and agents become aware that they're being mystery shopped. Now, if we move on to the next slide now, we're looking at 2 things here. Postal surveys, traditional good old postal survey, and also post-call structured telephone interviews, the good old telephone survey, human telephone survey. Now, if we look at postal surveys, as I think most people know now, with the advent of online and email surveys, postal surveys have an extremely low response rate, less than 1%. They kind of have had for a long time, and that's becoming lower and lower. But they are very slow. If you have a customer problem, they have to go through the post, they have to be processed, and they can take a long time. Some people still like them, and there is still a place for them, we think, to be used successfully in customer sat measurement and complaint management, particularly when they're used in onboard environments such as the cabins of planes or on ferries or ships. They have a sort of captive market there. But in first contact resolution terms, it's just too slow, and it's a bit of a dinosaur methodology. So moving across then to post-call structured telephone interviews, the main thing is that is probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the main market research tool used across a variety of different types of organization. But the reality of it is they've been overhauled now by the IVR survey. And the IVR survey is, of course, much, much cheaper. It's more immediate. You can go straight on the end of the call. And because you're not dialing out to the customer in their own time, they're far less invasive and more popular with end user callers. So that's why we tend to think those two methods don't really have much of a place either. Now, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit now about IVR. And when we were putting the right first time standard together, it's probably worth mentioning that we could have picked any methodology what we wanted to power that. But we wanted one that every organization could afford to take a photographic viewpoint as a one-off, if you like, to check the FCR performance. And we very quickly decided that IVR was the way to do that as a photograph, not as an ongoing process, because it doesn't get up into the sort of stage 3s and stage 4s of the maturity model that Rob was talking about earlier on. But IVR, we do like it, and we like the versions that have speech-to-text conversion capabilities. And we'll have a look at that in a second or two. But effectively, it's a good, affordable, catalyst empowering methodology for taking a first look at the truth of your FCR capabilities. And I think the one thing about speech to text is there's been a lot of false dawns on it. But the reality of it is, and I'll show you the slide now, the slide we have on it is actually we have very, very, very good experiences of converting speech to text. And I often play a particular example of a guy who's got a terrible stutter, and we were able to even capture that, so it's very, very good. But basically, what we have found using the speech-to-text scenario, of course, what it means is we're implementing a normal IVR survey with structured questions such as, how do you rate your agent 1 to 5? How do you rate your experience 1 to 5? The net promoter question, between 1 and 10. Would you advocate this service to a friend or colleague? We ask those sort of questions. And what we found is that there are, that those people taking the standard, those clients of ours are often shocked to see just how many of their agents are deployed in dealing with repeat calls. That's come through very, very consistently. Massive amount of wastage in terms of people dealing with repeat calls. And also, they're also sometimes quite shocked on how long-term repetition of repeat contact can actually impact the net promoter scores very adversely. So just to make 5 core observations that have come out of our experience of deploying IVR with speech to text, which I would make, and that is that as a photographic view, as a survey process, the IVR with speech, whether it's ours or it's IVR with speech generally, is as a photographic view, it's a very good halfway house as a research technique. It's much, much better than the suboptimal research methods we've described. It's better than call recording, and it's better than agent tagging as well. We should get this gamekeeper and poaching effect in there. And it's a good halfway house. It's a good enough stepping stone on the maturity model to move organizations forward and up into the more analytical services that are available. But the other thing it does, it also, we find, outperforms internal MI measurement because it's more immediate, and because it's in the contact center, the sort of open-ended responses that we see on the screen there, they can be real problems clients have. It could be, for example, one that I saw today on a client, which was a ferry company in the UK, where an individual had booked to have his wife treated specially because she was disabled. He hadn't received confirmation, and he rang back in and said, look, we're coming down in 30 minutes and we don't have a wheelchair booked. And they were able to put that right immediately. So it does generate those type of things, but and in that way, it's not just a clinical number. It does give the organization the opportunity to make some actions. Also, what we found is that established brands with high net promoter scores often have poor first contact resolution scores. And this is also often the case when they're taking a licking from new competitors on service. So just to say that again, because it's a bit of a shock for some people, established brands, you know, those sort of Ivy League type brands that you have in the United States, that we've worked for organizations like this in the UK, they tend to have very high net promoter scores because the customer will even apologize for complaining in some scenarios. But the reality of it is they have poor first contact resolution scores. So what they're really doing is they're riding the organization's 100-year reputation, and that can't go on forever. And we've seen that through the FCR work we've done as well. We've also seen, and again this is another shocker, we've also seen the most mature agents cause more repeat contacts than the junior ones. And one of our clients is a major travel brand that's well known in the United States, had a situation where they had 2 sites, and one of those sites it was recently open, and one of them had been open about 10 years. And the belief was within the business, even in the debriefing, was that the older site was teaching the younger site how to perform, and the reality of it was the older site, the older agents, more mature agent, what they were actually doing was teaching the younger guys bad habits on a very large scale. And fifth and finally here, the process of FCR measurement basically highlights the scale of scenarios in most of the organizations we worked with in the survey processes. Just how big a problem the situation is when a customer calls in and is asking for something they're not entitled to. I'll paraphrase that as a situation where the customer should have been told no by the agent. The agent should have said, I'm sorry, that's a no. And what we find is that we find this in the repeat reasons, that a big repeat reason, much bigger than people realize, is that agents avoid doing this, and in fact they pass responsibility on to someone else in the form of repeat contact. Now in the IVR with speech type survey process, we can highlight how weak other research methods are, but this method does need to be used as tracking a fully functional CRM interface, and it cannot achieve some of the goals that Rob will discuss in stages 3 and 4 of the maturity model. We believe as a photograph it's very strong, but as a tracking tool it can be made to work, but it does have the issue with agent cherry picking if it's used on a long-term basis, and that's worth bearing in mind. And just to bring things start to bring things to an end now, pass on. But what I would say is that we also have a situation that we found in the speech-to-text situation where you get a survey where you're asking a customer to rate something 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. In other words, how do they feel about the agent, for example, or how do they feel about the service? In the structured question, in the range question, they quite often will answer, in some cases, positively. But then when you ask them an open-ended response, which of course with the speech-to-text model, you can convert immediately and see it immediately, you have a situation they answer in the negative. And that happens in about 40% of the positive responses in a structured question who go on to answer it in an open-ended response will answer conversely to what they said in the structured element of the survey. And that's been quite uniform across what we've done. So to end, clearly survey methods have been around a long time, and it's our view that some of them are just too slow to be useful in terms of FCR measurement, and they're being used because they've always been used for CSAT. And they may make a small contribution going forward, but only a small contribution. But we do believe that deployment of an IVR survey with speech-to-text as a research survey tool can show the organization that they need to do a lot more to gain, to improve their FCR, but they do need to go further than the IVR survey process in terms of what they use to measure FCR on a tracking basis if they want to gain performance, basically measure performance indicators on a tracking or continuous basis. So that's me done, and I'll hand back to Sabrina.
Thank you so much, Mike. Now it's time for a polling question. So the question is, hopefully everybody's seeing that on their screen, do you measure first contact resolution across more than one channel? Yes or no? If everybody could actually take the time to answer that, that would